Ukraine, somewhere in the south, this summer. Cousin was part of a patrol moving through a contested region near a small village. Luckily, when the T-72 tank ahead of their BMP took a hit, it wasn't a direct hit, and the T-72 remained operational. Nevertheless, the two BMPs went to the flank, and my cousin's Humvee circled around as his Ukrainian counterparts were talking on the radio. My cousin checked his magazine, was good to go, checked that he had a round in the chamber, good to go, tightened up his armor, patted on his helmet, put on his eye pro, and kept a look out his window. Shit was about to go down. Radio chatter dies down, and cousins ask, "What are we doing?" "Engaging," was the response. This made his heart drop, his hands tighten, and he took a deep breath. So this is what he's trained for. His group had 2 Humvees, and between them, 8 soldiers. As they approached their destination, the commander ordered the gunners on the Humvees to stay with the Humvees, and everyone else dismounted and engaged. They roll up behind a shop, the commander opens his door, and the cousin follows suit. Guns raised, moving towards the shop, the commander says, "We clear the shop." They kick in the shop door, it appears abandoned. Cousin's unit conducts a sweep of the shop. Commander orders everyone to break out and find a way to the roof. It was a 2-story building. A few moments later, someone yells something out in Ukrainian. Commander barks in English about where to go. They get to the stairs, the commander points at the Ukrainian soldiers and tells them to provide security at the bottom of the stairs. The others go to the roof. They get to the roof and look over. There is a group of Russian vehicles and soldiers. Appears to be 2 T-72 tanks, a BMP, and an assortment of Russian soldiers. You could also see a defensive line. The Ukraine T-72 tanks had set up with the support of their BMP and other Ukrainian soldiers actively engaging the Russians. The commander ordered my cousin to grab a Javelin missile and said, "Far tank." He pointed at another soldier with a Javelin and said, "Close tank." They took that to mean their respective tanks. The commander and the other soldiers take up firing positions looking at the Russian position. My cousin reports he is ready to fire. The other Javelin operator reports the same. Commander orders fire. Boom, boom. 2 Javelins are now en route to the Russian forces. Reload. The commander shouts, boom, both tanks hit. The far Russian tank seemed to be operational. The commander orders my cousin, UT-72 tank. Far he looks at the other soldier, "You BMP." They both report they are ready. The commander orders fire, both missiles hit, and BMP stops firing with immediate effect, along with the remaining T-72 tank. Humvees now. Commander shouts. They get up, move down the stairs, and load back into the Humvee. As they were loading up, the commander said something in Ukrainian to the other Humvee driver. They get into the Humvee. Radio chatter. Silence. The commander taps the gunner and gives him the sign he's good to open fire. My cousin sees what they are doing. They are moving from the right of the Russians to the rear of the Russians. My cousin is seriously concerned because this means they will be right in front of the other friendly forces firing into the Russian lines. As they approach the rear, the commander shouts something on the radio. The Humvees stop behind a tree line, and the .50 calls on them suppress fire. My cousin dismounts again. They immediately break into 2 fire teams of 3 men, each and close in on the enemy. My cousin is scared as shit of getting hit by friendly fire, but he has to trust that his commander isn't being a moron. From my cousin's view, the other fire team disappears. They enter a Russian trench and move through it, engaging with enemy forces. They are careful as they move through the trenches. As he peers around a corner, he sees 2 Russian soldiers, one operating a machine gun, and the other with an AK-47, firing on the Ukrainians in front of him. My cousin takes aim and opens fire on the unsuspecting Russians. He says it's clear. They move forward. My cousin checks the next corner, doesn't see anyone, checks the Russians. If they are out, they are. He moves to the next section and sees a group of Russians lying down. 2 are obviously dead, and 1 is moving. My cousin reports this to another fellow soldier. The soldier says, "Cover me," and grabs his sidearm with my cousin providing cover. The soldier flips the Russian over, zip ties him, and throws his rifle toward my cousin. They move to the next part section, and they are told to sit tight at this point. My cousin sits center of the trench with his counterparts covering his left and right. They are in a trench. My cousin hears the code word, yells back the code word, and the trenches are clear. It was a 3-way assault. Fire team 1 left, fire team 2 right. The main Ukrainian force approached from the front after fire teams 1 and 2 had cleared the two biggest remaining pockets of resistance. End of the battle, 2 Ukrainians were killed, 4 injured, and none were on my cousin's team. 14 Russians Kia, 17 WEA, and 15 POWs. Apparently a couple of Russian soldiers were able to escape. Total engagement from start to finish, less than 30 minutes. Later it was explained they had a Ukrainian drone operator in their unit who had launched their drone, and everything was being coordinated by that drone operator and other leaders within the unit. As a prime example, the drone operator had identified the shop they went to as a solid firing position for Javelin. The drone operator felt there wasn't any activity around that shop. It was decided the best approach to end the Russian engagement was to sneak up from the rear. And right as the Humvees opened fire on the Russian positions, the Ukrainians on the main front stopped firing. The Humvees opening fire was more meant to confuse the Russians. They wanted the Russians to think they were still under fire. And they were, but they didn't like the Russians to know the fire was coming from the rear. So it was all timed. One of the Ukrainians killed was in the tank. The other was hit by a tank blast. And 3 injured were hit by the same explosion. Another one of the Ukrainians who was hurt was hit by a small arms fire. At the start of the engagement, the Russians technically outnumbered the Ukrainians by a tiny bit. However, due to the superior training, tactics, and equipment, the Ukrainians could overcome the ambush, engage with the enemy and eliminate them.